Hello everybody, my name is Joe Piazzo and this is my house on Page Street. It didn't always look like this. It actually was an abandoned property that I bought off the city a number of years ago, but after a lot of hard work, it went from being just a house to my home.
Page Street, located in the Hamilton Hill area of Schenectady, was once part of this thriving city, however suffered from industrial restructuring. Today, Page Street is still suffering due to crime and multiple abandoned homes. However, one community resident decided to invest and renovate this abandoned house into his beautiful home.
This is just about all left of major dust. As you can see, we've made some inroads. We've certainly got the bulk of the nasty out of here.
I moved here in 2005 or 6, so it's almost been 10 years now. And actually I never intended to actually buy property or own a house here. I was renting a house and I've rented almost all my life. I eventually got involved in doing video production work for the city and filming their city council meetings. And that's when I started to get interested in the housing situation that was going on in the city, principally by the houses that were being foreclosed on and abandoned, and basically watching the city dealing with its issues of housing and abandoned properties and stuff. You know, once in a while I'd see this thing go through the city council saying, oh, we're gonna buy a house for $1. And that's interesting because they're gonna buy a house for $1 and renovate it. And at the time I was renting an apartment. I said, well, you know, that's kind of interesting. If better neighborhoods can buy a house for $1, why can't I buy a house for $1? And I went down to the city hall and I went to a department that handled that and I said, could you give me a list of abandoned properties in the city? And they gave me a big thick list like this. I said, wow, it's a big spreadsheet. I looked through the spreadsheet and I said, okay, thank you. How much are they? And they said, well, you make an offer on the property, take a look at the property. If you think you can purchase it or buy it, take a look at it and make an offer to the city and the city will consider the offer. I found this one house on Page Street that was a wreck. I mean, it was, as I kind of kid people, but I said it was the worst house on the list. And for some reason, I drove up to it and I fell in love with the worst house on the list. It was a disaster. It was a complete disaster. And when I first got out of the car, I'll never forget, I was looking at the house and I heard a woman yell from across the street. She says, what do you want that crack house for? And I said, crack house? I was, if this is going to be a crack house, I'm going to make this into my crack castle.
Runs along, here's our central pillar, our support foundation for the center of our beam. You know what I did do is I put some additional concrete down, and that was not to support anything. That's just to help seal around that pier, and basically the pier is probably the hardest part to get the plastic.
Joe began renovation from the foundation, increasing the property value in the neighborhood. Joe dedicated 3 years of hard work and determination to manifest the true value of what was once considered a crack house in a suffering neighborhood.
And when I purchased the property, I realized from the onset that there was no way I could traditionally renovate this house and make it. It just wouldn't be possible. There was going to be no bank that was going to take a look at that property and loan me money against its equity, because there was no equity. It took probably 3 years total. And there was a lot of obstacles to doing this house in the way that I needed to do it to renovate it. So when I took the project on, I knew I was going to be able to borrow money. So I was going to have to take the money out of my pocket. And I knew that that would take longer because I was going to have to raise the money. I was going to have to work and do this. I knew there was no room to hire people. I couldn't hire a contractor to do the work. I had to save money every possible way I could. So I reused almost everything that I could possibly use in the house. If the water heater was good, it went out in the backyard, and when I finished cleaning up and renovating, I put it back in. I reused wood, windows. I mean, I recycled and reused as many of the materials in the house as possible. So most of us don't live in neighborhoods where we have a lot of foreclosures. And so, you know, you see 1 or 2 houses and you think it's kind of an isolated situation going on. When you look at, when you step back from it and look at cities as a whole, and you look at, say, a city like Buffalo, who has 1,000 abandoned properties, you start to realize that there's something else going on. And then you start to look at the city of Schenectady as a whole, and you realize that there's not just a house down the street that's abandoned, there are hundreds of abandoned properties and city-owned properties and foreclosed properties. And I mean, what struck me, one of the most tragic things that struck me about living up on the hill in the communities, I'll never forget, there was a burned out shell of a house up the street from mine on Ambrose. It was a disaster. It caught on fire and was completely burned, and there was no windows, and there was still black up in there, and it's been sitting there for years. And that house was right at the school bus stop. So every day, a whole group of small children who lived in that neighborhood stood in front of this disaster of just crumbling piece of property with graffiti on it and trash falling out into the street. And they got on the school bus in the morning in front of it, and they got off the school bus, and that was the first thing that they met when they went back home. That was their view of home. They got off the school bus, and there was just this decrepit, blighted piece of property that must have just stuck in their minds. I mean, just the idea that you see that and you say, I'm home. For a lot of people, never reach that. But that's what those blighted properties do to these neighborhoods, is they destroy the self-esteem of the people who live there. You walk by them and you look at them, we say to people, why don't people have more respect for their properties? But they also look at things every day, and they look at these properties and they say to themselves, well, how can I possibly have respect for myself if I'm living in an environment which nobody else respects me?